Good morning, everyone. Mayor Durkan, we appreciate you being here. Before we get to the topic that we had scheduled you to come on and talk about, we do want to address the shooting in North Seattle. That community is horrified today, understandably so. There's a King County Metro bus driver in the hospital as well as someone else, 2 people dead. What is your message to that community up there this morning?
I think a couple things. First is, we went up to the community last night, and it's a really vibrant, strong community. Lake City is a part of town that not everyone gets to. Our hearts really go out to the people who lost their lives and their families and the people who are still in the hospital. It was such a random series of events to lose 2 lives, to have people injured, but we saw some real heroic actions. As you know, the bus driver who was shot was able to call for help and get his bus out of there to save his passengers while he was injured. I mean, just amazing stuff that shows what the mettle of some people, what they can do under danger.
Yeah, so much presence of mind. It makes us wonder if we could do the same thing in that situation. I'm sure you've been kept up to date on this investigation. Do we have a motive yet? Do we know why?
No, we don't have a motive yet. Good news we have is both people in the hospital now are in stable condition. They entered in critical condition, so we see that that's improving. As you can imagine, there was 3, 4 separate sites the police have to investigate, many witnesses, they got cell phone video. And I also have to really give a lot of credit to our firefighters, our police, the other first responders, because when people responded to the situation, no one knew what was going on. Was there still an active shooter? Were there multiple people? And yet they always run to danger. And they help people, they stabilize people, they enter some of the most horrific scenes themselves. And so I think it's a really good story to show how community can come together to respond to such a tragic incident.
Yeah, heart goes out to everyone impacted by that. We'll be following that story closely throughout the day. Now on to the reason that we brought you in today. We appreciate you coming to talk to us about homelessness. There is a growing narrative that the city is not doing enough, that the city is not making a dent in the issue. There was a documentary, a 1-hour documentary that is a different TV station aired that was controversial recently called, the title was Seattle is Dying. Seattle is dying, and the thought is that because we've let this situation get so out of control, the city's soul is dying. Some people took issue with that title. What do you think? Is Seattle dying?
Seattle's not dying. Look, it reminds me a little bit of Mark Twain when he was visiting Europe. People thought he had died and newspapers ran the story, and he wrote back saying, reports of my death are greatly exaggerated. We're a city that's the fastest growing city in America still. We have thousands of people moving here. We're reforming our waterfront, our arena, convention center. We have some of the most innovative companies, and as we saw last night, some of the strongest, most resilient communities anywhere. That doesn't mean we don't have challenges, and I want all people to know that every week, Chief Best and I meet and talk. And the police department every 2 weeks is looking at crime statistics in every part of the city, looking for trends. How do they enforce it? What do they do? And so we have a bunch of different things that are coming together here. One is we know we have a really significant issue with people experiencing homelessness. We also know that we have, as you reported in your last segment, that mental health is a great challenge, and the state has defunded Western State and Eastern State, and there aren't supports in the community to deal with that. So, and then you've got a criminal justice system that frankly is a little bit overwhelmed. All those things at once coming together, we've got to figure out how do we get solutions going forward.
So let's talk about that. You and I could sit here and we have many times talked about how did we get this bad? How did things get like this? What I want to talk about is where do we move forward from here? The business community is angry. They issued a cry for help, essentially. They put out this report called the Prolific Offenders Report, where they looked at 100 people. And these aren't, they're all homeless, but people have to understand there's a big segment of the homeless population that isn't violent. But they looked at 100 people who have been in and out of jail on the streets, and no one has done much of anything to make sure that they're getting help for the underlying cause of their behavior, or to make sure that they have an ounce of accountability for their behavior. It's my understanding that this morning you're here to talk to us about maybe a first step in addressing the issues outlined in this report.
So a couple things. First, I think important to understand is it's not true that there hasn't been an ounce of accountability or that people haven't done anything.
Why do people feel that way then? Why do people feel that way?
Because a number of things. One reason we're here is so people understand what the information is, rather than just issue a report without talking to us to get the information. So to give you an example, we've met now and carefully looked at the list of 100 people. Most of those people actually were charged with crimes, convicted of crimes. But about 25% were found what's called not competent to stand trial. That means they have significant enough mental health problems. The court can't hold them. You can't put them in jail. And so what do you do with them? Those group of people that we're seeing that's where we don't have enough support. So I've reached out. It's a really complicated issue because some people are arrested with felonies. They go to Superior Court, and Dan Satterberg and his office are the ones who make prosecutorial decisions. Those who commit misdemeanors go to the municipal court, and Pete Holmes' office makes those decisions. So we're pulling together all people. I've talked to the presiding judge at King County Superior Court, Sean O'Donnell, presiding judge at the municipal court. I've talked to Pete Holmes and Dan Satterberg and Dow Constantine to see, we're going to create a working group, bring everyone together so we don't have those gaps in the system. And we can really determine, first, who are those people that really are public safety risk? And how do we make sure that we have a criminal justice intervention that addresses that public safety risk and has accountability? Who are those people that may need an intervention, but that really need significant either drug or substance abuse help, mental health, and other accountability measures?
So we're talking quickly about 4 separately elected leaders, and I think people forget this sometimes. Mayor of Seattle, the executive of King County, Dow Constantine, the elected city attorney, Pete Holmes, and the elected King County prosecutor, Dan Satterberg. So you're saying...
And the elected judges.
And the elected judges. You're going to get everyone together.
We're going to get everyone and do a working group.
People get terrified by phrases like that, working group.
I agree.
Is this going to be a working group where you all sit around and talk about the problem, but nobody does anything?
No. So I think we have to really clearly Seattle Police Department actually already does a very good job of trying to say, where do we have significant increases in crime and what are our strategies for doing it? We've had in every part of the city operational activities to really deal with that, and we will continue to do that. For example, there was a string of arsons that I think also reported this morning. Seattle Police Department was on that right away, did great investigation. We have a suspect in custody. You know, we saw a series of shopliftings in North Seattle where we did great operations. We're able to arrest a number of people, take them off the streets. We've seen activity that, you know, there's organized crime shoplifting rings that come up and down the West Coast that actually pay people to go in a store and bring out their shopping list of items and then move and sell it in a different place. So we're going to continue to do our criminal enforcement. But at the meantime, we can't have a situation where courts can't hold them, you can't arrest them, and you don't get them the help that they need.
It's not fair to them either.
It's not fair to
the
them.
People on the streets. And the business committee, I want the people in the booth to make sure that the mayor can hear this sound I'm going to play for her. Our Hannah Kim has been doing some extraordinary reporting on this, going to the business community to say, show us what's happening to you on a daily basis. She met with the CEO of Bartell Drugs, and they say they're not going to open any more drugstores in downtown Seattle. And Hannah got some surveillance video that just sheds a little bit of a light on what they're dealing with on a daily basis. I want to show that for you.
What you're about to see is someone shoplifting. In one aisle at a Bartell drugstore in Seattle, this man managed to quickly walk out with up to $700 worth of cosmetic products. It happens every day. This video shows a pharmacist stumbling back with a broken nose. Bartell says he simply asked a shoplifter if he could help them pay for the items he had witnessed the suspect stealing. Many times there is nothing they can do but just pick up the pieces, like in this case when a man lashes out and trashes the store. He appears to be going through a psychotic episode.
What do you say to the business community that is dealing with these things? Their employees are being assaulted. And again, let's separate homelessness from violent offenders. In any population, there are violent and nonviolent people. We're talking about violent criminals, whether they be homeless or not, that are repeatedly coming into these places. Bartell's they don't know what they're going to do about being part of Seattle and its business community. You're going to put this working group together, you're going to talk about it. What do you tell them now? What do they do now?
So we want to make sure that, you know, the Bartell family has been in Seattle for generations. Yeah. I've met with them. I've talked to them previously. I meet with business leaders throughout the city, particularly small business leaders on a regular basis. We will make sure that we want to do what we can so that those violent criminals, that we have a strategy to deal with them. You arrest and prosecute, and those that you can't hold because they have mental health or other problems, that we actually have resources to deal with them to make sure that they have the resources and the community is safe. I talked to Sean O'Donnell, who is the presiding judge at King County Superior Court. There's a court that deals with involuntary commitment so that people who have mental health issues, you can get them forced treatment if needed. it is overwhelmed right now. You know, as you know, we have a thing called Ricky's Law, which if someone overdoses or kills themselves or endangers themselves, you can get them committed for involuntary treatment for their addiction. In Seattle, how many beds do we have to deal with that? 0.
It's insane.
It's insane. So we need, you know, the city doesn't finance that and the city doesn't control the mental health system. But the businesses need to know that's not an excuse. We need everyone in a room to say, what are we going to do to make sure that we do better by the citizens of Seattle, the residents of Seattle, the business of Seattle, but also the people experiencing homelessness.
I'm glad you say it's not an excuse, because it's not an excuse. And I don't mean to put all of this on you as the mayor of Seattle. We have so many facets in this state that are failing people. And one of them primarily is an underfunded, failing to work mental health system. So I appreciate your willingness to sit here and talk about it in depth. And I want to acknowledge that it's not just Mayor Jenny Durkan's fault, but the city of Seattle does play a big role in this. You know, I was up in Arlington recently, and they kind of criticized Seattle, not directly, but you could tell they were talking about Seattle, and they said, you know, there's a fine line between helping and enabling. I want to play you part of the conversation I had with the Arlington police chief and with the mayor of Arlington, Barbara Tolbert. Listen.
As you're probably familiar, a lot of people are okay with the circumstances they're in. They don't want that help, and our community has been very clear that that is unacceptable. You cannot be 40 years old living behind the dumpster at the local grocery store, panhandling for drugs and stealing all the food you need.
Do you guys prosecute shoplifts in the city of Arlington?
We do.
Do you prosecute car prowls in the city of Arlington?
Definitely.
We like to say that we'll walk beside you every step of the way and help you in any way we can if you want to leave the life of opioid addiction and get off the streets. We'll be your partner in that. But if you don't want that help, we don't have a place for you in the community. We will use law enforcement. We won't tolerate the thefts or the burglaries or the trespassing on property.
Look, Arlington is not Seattle. I think we can all agree on that. But what do you make of that sentiment? Do you believe that what they're painting is a picture of something much different than what the city of Seattle is doing?
100%. Look, we arrest and prosecute hundreds of people for shoplifting, for trespassing, and they get convicted. So there's a big disconnect, and people have to admit, it is simply not true that we are not arresting and prosecuting these people. What is happening is there are repeat offenders. We have to understand why, and we have to break that cycle. For the people who are causing actual harm to the community and deserve a criminal justice intervention, we're talking to Dan Satterberg and Pete Holmes to figure out how do we make sure that happens, and when they get arrested, the courts hold them. We get time and we get the resources to deal with them. So I would say, the other thing I would say is, my fellow mayors in the jurisdiction is we're going to have a lot of discussions about, for example, who in Seattle is experiencing homelessness and where they're from. Mm-hmm. An incredible number of the people that the city of Seattle and the residents of Seattle pay to serve and help are actually from those cities. You know, we saw during the snowstorm where the mayor of Federal Way decided the best way to deal with his homeless was to send them to Seattle.
Hey, but in his defense, he said that was because they didn't have shelters for them. So you're talking about, do you send someone up to Seattle on a bus to get out of the cold, or do you leave them on the streets there to freeze to death?
No, you build shelters.
Well, that's the thing,
and you provide services. I mean, there is another option.
I hope that the next year they do that.
Yeah.
Because those people shouldn't be bused to Seattle.
Right.
And that's been this long rumor that people are bused to Seattle.
I want to add one thing.
The shoplifting thing is not true. The shoplifting thing is not true. They dismissed thousands of shoplifting and misdemeanor cases. There is a rumor that Pete Holmes doesn't even prosecute shoplifts under a certain value. Is that true?
So let's talk about the list of 100. You know, we did data on, I said, who's on this list, what really happened? Most of those people were not only prosecuted, they were convicted. So it's not that we aren't prosecuting and convicting people, it is that at different links in the system, you're seeing the same people cycle through. So which of those people are a threat to the community? You know, when I was U.S. Attorney, we would have to devise systems to say, we've either got a significant type of crime problem or a regional problem, and we did hotspot initiatives. That's the kind of thing we're doing now here is, how do we make sure that we are lessening the impacts on community, which is critically important, providing services. But I think it's also really important, Brandy, as you did at the beginning of this program, not to conflate homelessness with criminal activity. There's 12,000 people living unsheltered in King County. and that we know that we've got a serious, significant element, but that is still a minority of the people experiencing homelessness who are these repeat offenders. So if we can identify that universe of people and bring together, you know, first the elected leaders in jurisdictions, but have at the table people who are the service providers, the mental health providers, public health, public defenders, and say, look, we got a problem, we got to fix it.
Yeah.
And if we don't get people to fix some of that underlying problem, we will continue to see this. You know, we saw it early on in my career. You know, I was fortunate enough to work with a family to help establish one of the first mental health courts in the state of Washington, because we saw this rising problem even then. The problem is even greater today because we so defunded mental health and community supports. And you can arrest someone over and over again and put them in jail, but if they continue to come out in the community without support and services, you will see that behavior.
Yeah.
So we've got to change that.
And I think it's important. And I hope that the issue is we have everybody on this side talking about help them, everybody on this side talking about prosecute them, and everybody has to be of the understanding that we're talking about a population of people. And within that population of people are people experiencing a wide variety of issues. Some people can't afford a place to live. Some people are mentally ill. And some people, yes, are violent criminals, and so we can't keep lumping them all into the same pot and expecting that prosecuting the way out of the problem is going to solve it. But prosecuting is part of the solution. I want to get back to that question I asked, just a quick answer on it. Is it true that Pete Holmes doesn't prosecute shoplifts under a certain value?
I don't know about the value, and it's not true that he isn't prosecuting shoplifters. I looked at the list yesterday of the 100 in terms of what happened to them. As I said, the majority of them were not only prosecuted, they were convicted, either through guilty pleas or at court. 25%-ish could not be prosecuted because they were found not competent to stand trial. So those are the kinds of people you will see again and again until we have a system. I also think it's really important for people to remember that it's not just people experiencing homelessness. What we saw last night in Lake City, there was a person who went into their home, got a gun, shot and killed 2 people, injured 2 other people. And so crime is not limited to people who are unsheltered or sheltered, and it's really important for us not to conflate homelessness with criminal activity. Is there a Venn diagram where they overlap?
Some people are stealing to survive. Some people are stealing to survive, and that's the reality of the situation. You don't have a lot of people who are housed with stable incomes who are going down to a Bartell's and stealing $750 worth of products. I mean, some people truly do steal to survive, and I don't want to act as if it's the crime of the century, but when you have a business that experiences that every single day, that's not fair.
No, it absolutely isn't. And what you have to deal with is it the individual who's the stealing, or in some circumstances, I prosecuted a case where literally you had Eastern European rings who would come and take homeless people, give them the shopping list of go into Bartell's and bring these things out, or go into Nordstrom's and bring these things out, and we'll give you a little cash.
And that's because they're stealing to survive.
They're
stealing for someone else for a little cash to survive, or to fund a drug habit.
Or to fund a drug habit or the like. So there's a correlation. Look, everyone knows that as property crimes go up, the retailer and the business is the first to suffer. Because they operate on margins, they're trying to serve the community. You know, Bartell's is one of those stores that has been in every part of Seattle for over a century. And so we want to make sure that if they are kind of the canary in the cage, that we're dealing with that situation honestly, you know, and we're working for solutions. So I think we've still got a ways to go. But I also want to end with is, you know, it's easy to zoom a camera in and all you're focused on is the problem. If you zoom that camera out, Seattle is doing really well.
We want to see it everywhere. We want to see it for everyone.
Absolutely.
I want to see it for the people on the streets. I want to see them get better, and I hope everybody watching wants to see them get better. We want to see them be part of that, all the great things that Seattle has going on.
Yeah, and we've seen some, look, we've seen some things that have gotten better. We're seeing now, you know, 2 weeks ago we did a pen and pad showing the data on homelessness.
Yeah.
If we use diversionary money that says, you know, we'll help you pay rent, we'll help you stay out of homelessness, we're seeing it keep people housed and creating opportunity. We have done a good job when we focus on veterans and youth. We know we can help there. So we are seeing progress on a lot of levels, and it's important for people to understand that too, that it is not just one big hopeless situation, that when we pull together as a community, we can do things that are positive. And then when we haven't done it, we got to focus on it and do better.
2 really quick things, if my producer is going to tell us we have time. I know we're kind of stretching here. there was a video going around of a man before the city council meeting. We got to switch gears quick. I just want to ask you about two things really briefly. There's a video of a man trying to testify before the Seattle City Council that went viral because the council kind of ignores him and is a little rude to him, to be frank. There are some people who think that that guy is kind of a city council troll, but his name is Richard Schwartz. You called him personally and you had a conversation with him. What'd you say? I
did. I called him and said that I think it's important for people to be heard. I wanted to know what he was calling about. We had a good discussion. He raised an issue about the bike lane on Westlake and whether it was safe for pedestrians crossing. We're going to look at it and get back to him.
Good.
Look,
does the city council listen to people?
I think that individual city council members do, and at large they do, but it's a difficult job too. Anyone who's been in that city council chamber, it can get very, very intense very fast. And a lot of the people in there are hurling insults at the individual council members. They're not there to be constructive. I'm not saying that about Mr. Schwartz. So I think we have to judge it in the total of what they do day in, day out. And I also know that those council members, like Deborah Juarez, was with me last night in Lake City. It's her district. She cares deeply about that district. And other members from the community. I thought one of the things that was so inspiring last night, that shows again that Seattle's not dying. Here we are in this really horrific, terrible event with the streets still closed, police everywhere, and the small business owners, the community, they all showed up at the community center to be at that press conference because they cared.
Yeah.
And so I think that, we can all do better. I get a lot of emails and people that maybe aren't as kind as others.
You do?
I know, shocking.
I would have guessed that. Okay.
But we have to, there's people who show up at all the meetings we go to. And it's a hard part of politics right now because it's so fraught with emotion. But I think we all have to take a deep breath and try to treat everybody with respect and listen.
Yeah. One more very important question, I'll let you go. How's your health? People may have heard you had surgery to have a melanoma removed from your leg. I see you're without brace today.
Yay, without brace.
Which is great. So how are you doing?
I'm doing much better. I will admit it was a pretty scary time between the time that it was diagnosed and when the final pathology came back, because there was a very bleak road and a very positive road. I was fortunate that I had great access to great health care, great doctors, and I caught it early. And now I'm just have to learn not to limp. I'm in physical therapy trying to get my leg back.
Are you cancer-free?
I am cancer-free.
All right.
Yeah.
Seattle Mayor Jenny Durkan, we appreciate you sitting here, being willing to address and talk about these very important issues in depth, and I'm glad to hear that you're doing better.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for joining us. We're back after this.